A courageous Oklahoma teen finds himself entangled in a legal battle against the state's educational system led by the controversial superintendent of bigotry, Ryan Walters. Walters used his influence to have their petition denied by the Oklahoma State Board of Education. Under Walters' influence, an emergency rule demanded state approval for such changes was passed. A lawsuit now accuses Walter of personal bias, discrimination, and blatant violation of due process and parental rights. The clash sheds light on the broader challenges faced by transgender people in navigating conservative-led policies that, in this case, appear to be driven by Walter's bigoted stance on transgender issues. This story is from NBC News by Tyler Kincaid on January 9th, 2024.
Oklahoma, Oklahoma, oh, Oklahoma. What do we do with Oklahoma? What do we do with Oklahoma? What do we do with Ryan Walters? Oh, what do we do with Ryan Walters? He is a real problem. He's a genuine issue in this day and age. I mean, from dance scholarship theft to Bibles in classrooms to not knowing the first thing about actual education, to what we see here is analogous to Oklahoma creating a bill of attainder. Those of you who don't know what a bill of attainder is, it was medieval Britain used to use bill of attainders. Henry VIII liked them quite a lot. He would have his parliament pass legislation to remove civil rights, and in some cases the right to life, from people he didn't like. They were mainly, you could mainly tell who they were because they were Catholic. You could mainly tell those people because they'd slept with his wife or something, or he wanted a new wife. You could usually tell things like that. But Oklahoma and, you know, good old Ryan Walters is doing the same thing here. It's taking a group of people and removing the civil rights and declaring them guilty of existing incorrectly, which is absolute pettiness and absurdity. I mean, Kansas has beaten to the punch on some of these bill of attainders. I mean, Kansas passed an entire piece of legislation to stop one person playing sports. One person playing sports. It's absolute, utter codswallop what policies we see coming from Superintendent Wishy-Washy Walters here. It's absolute farce, shall we say. He comes along not knowing the first thing about what he's supposed to be doing. As I say, he is the superintendent of the education system. The title should give him some clue that he's supposed to be doing education. Doesn't do that. He does religion. Religion. That's what he does. He does bigotry. The word that's missing there is education. It's missing here. But the problem that Ryan Walters has created here is that he's created an Oklahoma education system that's laughable. Out of the 50 states in the Union, Oklahoma sits 45th for educational attainment. Just Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and West Virginia. Not the least religious of places on earth. In fact, probably as religious, if not more religious than Oklahoma, fall below them. So I'm sensing a correlation here. Not necessarily a causation, but I'm sensing a definite correlation here, Kelly.
Yeah, there is definitely a correlation. And I noticed that all of those states tend to be in a certain geographical area of the United States, too, which I find
West Virginia is the outlier.
Not saying
here, but
it's
that's
a causation.
right at the bottom.
Just
West Virginia is 50th.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody knows who Mr. Ryan Walters is, but I did do a little dig into finding out exactly what he stands for, some of the things he's done in his political career. And in 2022, he promulgated.
I mean, he is from the past, Kelly.
Yes, he is
a
he
relic
is. And
from
I'm
the
too,
past.
and sometimes my brain gets stuck back there. So, but while he was campaigning in 2022, he did promulgate the old litter boxes in high school bathrooms hoax, which I thought was really funny because I've made it no secret that I live in an area where there's very few people. And in like a 25-mile radius, we have 3 small towns. All 3 towns have their own high school. And that rumor was going around, but it was always at the other 2 high schools. It was never at the high school that of the town you were in, you know? So if you were in my town, it was in the other 2 high schools. And I thought that was really funny. None of the high schools actually had it happening. It was the other high schools that were. But almost as soon as he got into office, because I'm just digressing here, so let's get back. He did fire 2 teachers because they were very critical publicly of a bill that had just been passed by the Oklahoma legislature that was limiting what they could teach about gender and race, sex and race. So they were kind of pissed off about that and wanted to change it. And sure enough, he fired them. In 2023, he spoke at a Moms for Liberty, you may have heard of them, at their national summit in Philadelphia, and he advocated eliminating the United States Department of Education, and he also criticized teachers' unions. Then in a July, just a month later, town hall, he was asked, how does the Tulsa race massacre not fall under the definition of being taught as as an example of critical race theory? And he responded, let's not tie it to skin color and say that skin color determined what happened in Tulsa in that incident. Yes, you're right. He is a bigot. Yes, people did vote for him. Hey, you know what? You can't use that word on air, even if it does rhyme with duck. Get out of here. So this guy has got a long history of being bigoted, and not only bigoted against gender, but of race as well. So, I mean, this what we're seeing here this time, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, it's just par for the course of what this guy is like. I've got some more things, but I don't want to take up all the time, so I'm going to pass it on to Jimmy, and I'll go over some more when it comes back to me.
You're quite the thespian, you and your duck acting partner. I don't know how I'll follow that, but I don't think that there's a whole lot I would disagree with all of you on either. I think I found my own correlation and perhaps not causation. And I don't know if the timing of this law is a coincidence or not, but on the very same meeting agenda, in fact, the very item preceding discussion of this law at the September 28th, 2023 meeting of the State Board of Education, it was determined that the Tulsa Board of Education was still accepting Chinese government funding after the Confucius Institute program had been deemed a subversive Chinese foreign mission by the State Department in 2009. And so the real problem with this funding, which I don't know if it's necessarily illegal, but certainly frowned upon in that almost all 143 recipients of this funding have ceased their contracts except for 7. And not only that, but the Tulsa Board of Education was covering up receiving these funds and not informing parents. And instead, they were receiving funds from a kind of through a shadow organization in Texas. And this report, there was a report done by Parents Defending Education that found that this funding was being masked. And I just think it's significant because this discussion, the discussion of passing this law took place kind of right after this. Walters had to justify why the Tulsa board was still accepting money. He actually had to answer to Congress because of this, due to in-depth investigation that was taking place there. And I think that we're seeing the transgender community perhaps be a scapegoat. We've seen that before. Minorities or disparaged groups just kind of thrown under the bus to take the heat off of government officials for, I don't know, other reasons. And so I don't know if this is correlation. It's probably not causation, but being under fire for accepting funds from a foreign shadow organization through a domestic shadow organization that aimed to indoctrinate children should not be met with more harm to other children by denying them their rights. And so all in all, the Oklahoma education system just seems to be falling apart in multiple facets and just can't get anything right. So Infidel, what do you say?
Ryan Walters has demonstrated himself to be quite the useless character on more than one occasion. We've covered him on nonprofits, but I think you really nailed something there, Jimmy, when you're talking about how we had a mistake. We're having to answer for it. Let me distract you with something else. I see this time and again with even family members who, it's like, yeah, but what about, Europe or Hillary's emails or whatever little popular distraction that can get someone away from their own shortcoming. And obviously he's not going to want to approach that. But one thing I did listen to very carefully was one thing that Walters made a comment on Real America's Voice. It's a rather right-wing media organization, but he said, parents absolutely know what's best for kids, and anyone who doesn't understand has no business being involved in education whatsoever.
Mr. Walters, the
Ryan
door is
Walters,
over there.
Amen. I'm with you. This coming from the...
Stop you there. Because in the article itself, the parents of this child, one, a conservative political-leaning father, and one, a God-fearing church-going mother, both support him. So Ryan Walters, the door's over there. Don't let it hit you on the way out.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy, and when we think about an emergency rule, this is 6 grown people sitting in a room making a decision that's going to impact this teen boy, and they're overriding not only a parent's decision, but a court order. What could possibly be so important? I do know that in their statement, they claimed that they wanted to protect the accuracy of historic records for future use. Well, damn, let's teach them literacy. Let's teach them literacy in Oklahoma so someone could even read those historic records. But seriously, what could be the result if a student in Oklahoma was allowed to update their records that would require 6 people to make this such a priority?
And with the schools at 45th in the nation, how many people could read those records?
Yes, absolutely. Let's focus on teaching your kids, and let's not worry about 6 people who are being paid by the state to bully a young kid without even seeing him. So much for knowing what's best for the parents, knowing absolutely what's best for their child. I think that only applies when the parents agree with Walters. But, another thing that I found totally sickening is quoting Walters again. He said, we're not going to do the transgender game of back and forth. That is such a dishonest statement. You would think that people got up and said, well, what kind of cereal and what gender do you want to go through the courts today to decide that you're going to be? This is so dishonest on so many levels, but this puts Ryan Walters right back where it belongs, and that is where he thinks what he knows is best is the right one. Ryan Walters doesn't care about children. He's busy fighting a war.
The thing to remember here, though, is who do these documents affect apart from the student themselves? Who, in this day and age, no one on this panel, nobody watching unless the actual student themselves is watching, or is an educator that's going to receive their high school transcripts is watching, is affected by this in any way.
Not even in the slightest. But for him, it is more important about his grandstanding than him and his unwillingness to accept people not as they are, but how he decides they need to be. You know, it was touched on the Tulsa race massacre and how let's not bring color into that. And he's even said that separation of church and state is a myth. So
it's in the title, the Tulsa race massacre.
But then again, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is state-sponsored atheism, according to him. So in Ryan Walters' world, the world is what Ryan Walters wants it to be and what his supporters want it to be in their delusion to, well, essentially run scared. And
the most insidious thing here, though, the most insidious thing that I picked up from this was the echoes that you hear from the same people who said, you were once a slave, I don't recognize you as a free person, to trans people who say, I don't recognize you as the sex that you actually are. Because what they're saying is, you were once assigned to be the property of somebody else. And they're saying to trans people, you were once assigned a sex at birth. Don't matter if it was accurate. Don't matter if you had any choice in it. Those are the same rhetorics. And people need to realize racism and transphobia go hand in hand. And until people like Ryan Walters are chased away from the education system and chased away from ruining people's lives, it's going to continue, because you're going to have court orders that are defied. You're going to have lives ruined because they're saying we must protect historically accurate records because you were assigned something that you had no choice in the same way that slaves were assigned property at birth of somebody else. And what makes it even more egregious is that trans people were denied the right to get married for years, and slaves were also denied the right to get married in the same way that free people were, because it wasn't just their vows that said, till death do us part. It was till death or distance do us part, because they weren't seen as having been assigned correctly within the system. And when you see these parallels, I am physically sick that it is still going on in the 21st century in the most industrialized nation on earth.
Yep. I wanted to, Jimmy mentioned the whole thing that was going on with China, and he actually opposed that a lot. He was very outspoken about that Chinese funding, from what I understood. However, when he did give an okay to, and we just mentioned this earlier this week in an earlier story, PragerU came to Oklahoma school districts and wanted to provide curriculum with funding from gas and oil companies that had a little bit of propaganda in it. And during congressional hearings, Representative Raul Grijalva, I always have a hard time saying his name, asked Walters about allowing the oil and gas industry to influence climate change curriculum through PragerU. And he responded, these are American companies that are a benefit to the American economy. So I don't see any issue with them having influence on our education system. So it kind of was like, to me, it was like this two-faced thing. We don't want these people having influence, but it's okay to let these people do it.
It's cartoonish.
And I just thought that was bullshit. And
it's cartoonish nonsense.
He also wanted to sue the FFRF, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, for sending a letter to an Oklahoma school district asking them to stop using prayer in the school curriculum. The FFRF then issued an open letter to Walters saying, you regularly misuse the official governmental social media afforded to your public office and treat it as a pulpit from which to preach your personal religious views and Christian nationalist propaganda. And that was just 7 weeks ago that they issued that statement. So this is not a nice guy. This is not the kind of guy that we want in charge of our children. So yeah, I don't even know why these people in Oklahoma would have this guy there. So
I think his opposition to receiving international funding from a competitor country came after he was confronted about it, in which he had to kind of stand up and save face, continue his grandstanding. You know, the Tulsa School District makes $1 million a year through this program, and having found other donors to take that place is not a surprise at all. And I still stand by the idea that, you know, it's probably pretty likely that, you know, he kind of replaced this one scandal with another one that I think he can get a lot more political support for. And so I want to go to answering Phoebe's question about, you know, do we think education is being forgotten? I don't think it's being forgotten. I think it's being weaponized. I think it's very much on the front burner. I think everybody has their eye on education, and they're trying to find a way to manipulate it to use it in their favor. At least where I think, you know, white Christian nationalism is concerned.
Yeah, I would have to say that I agree with the thought that education is very much a priority for people like this. More accurately, perhaps I should say miseducation, but there is a goal. There is very much an agenda and a plan that they have in effect with this. This isn't just idle chit chat. Now, admittedly, I think they bounce from target to target because in this type of environment, you always need somebody to say the thems, the somebody else's, the somebody we can disparage and, as Phoebe pointed out, quite literally dehumanize. And that's what's going on there. You need that enemy. In 1984, Europa was friends with this one and enemies with that one. Now we're friends with, you know, Eurasia and enemies with, you know, they always bounced around. And that's what they're doing. They're bouncing from enemy to enemy here. And really, at the end of the day, education shouldn't be a weapon, but it has become that. And Phoebe?
I will just say this to Ryan Walters directly. If you want to teach religion, go and teach at your local Sunday school. And if you want to find out more about what we have said about Ryan Walters, click here.